Primeiramente, então, eu gostaria de agradecer o convite, né, pelo professor Silva Neto e pelo Dr. Jader Lugon Júnior, para apresentar nesse simpósio para você um pouquinho sobre como é que como está a situação da água, então, na Europa e focando, então, no Chipre. Eu vou só pedir desculpas antecipadamente, mas a minha apresentação vai ser em inglês, tá?
Então, ainda não veio a apresentação não, tá, Edna?
Sério? No meu... deixa eu tentar de novo, porque, na verdade, eu já estou fazendo o share do meu screen com vocês. Ok.
Isso sempre tem um...
Agora foi? Agora tá?
Agora veio. Tá. Perfeito.
Então, tá bom. Eu vou mudar agora para o inglês, tá? So, the title then of my presentation is Water Contamination in Europe, with a special focus on Cyprus, from microplastics to parasites. This is the agenda. This is what I plan to tell you a little bit about within this very short period. Yes. And we can start talking about water, for instance. Yeah. This is the UN World Water Development Report 2021. And some of the points that they have in this report is that the water quality has deteriorated, yes, in nearly all major rivers in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Yeah. There are significant data gaps for wastewater, and they actually estimate that more than 80% of all industrial and municipal wastewater is released into the environment without any prior treatment. Yes, if some treatment would actually be done to this wastewater, this could have a very big economic impact, where we could be recovering water, nutrients, precious metals, and energy from this wastewater. In 2000, yes, the EU adopted the Water Framework Directive with aim to establish a framework for the protection of inland surface waters, transitional waters, coastal waters, and groundwaters. There was a deadline then for 2015 to get all European waters in good condition. When they set this Water Framework Directive, they took into consideration several facts. That water is under pressure in Europe, yes, that the EU should be looking into river basins and pollutions because the rivers cross borders. Yes. So we have some of the rivers within Europe that they go and they cross different countries. So we could not be establishing then a program just for particular countries. So they decided that the water should achieve good ecological and chemical status to protect human health, water supply, natural ecosystems, and biodiversity. The people should be involved as well. So this shouldn't be a top-to-down approach, but it should be a horizontal process. There was some progress, yes, but much more needed to be done. This water management should be linked to and integrated to many different policies. And they also took into consideration the fact that climate change would really create challenges for the future. When we talk about this fact 7, yes, they were expecting that in the summer, in the south and east parts of Europe, we would have lower rainfall and higher summer temperatures. We are still living this, yes? The average summer temperatures here in Cyprus, for instance, we had this 47, 45 degrees Celsius, yes? And they would be expecting also more rain and a higher flood risk, especially in the north. And this is what happened in Europe very recently. In Germany, I think in July, dozens of people died in floods. Yes. And the picture on top is just one that happened recently also in Scotland. And I think there was also floods taking place in Belgium. This Water Framework Directive was complemented by more specific EU laws, yes, about quality standards, the Floods Directive, the Bathing Water Directive, Drinking Water Directive, and all these other ones. So this directive was not a standout alone directive, but it was actually complemented by other EU laws. So 2015 passed, yes. The EU published then, now in 2019, a check on fitness check for the Water Framework Directive. And this I'm going to present in the next few slides, some of these results. So what they showed was that the results were mixed. There was some success, yes. So they were able to set up a governance framework for integrated water management, yes. But there was no substantial progress in water bodies' overall status. And this, what they were aiming for all the EU water bodies to be in good status, actually, they found that less than half of the EU water bodies are in good status. There was some improvement in flood risk management, but as I showed you previously, what happened in Germany, for instance, and even in the UK, that there is still a lot of work to be done. This is the fitness check then. So the conclusions from this fitness check was the directives are fit for purpose. That is a scope for improvement. Yes, they found that through this Water Framework Directive, there was a higher level of protection for water bodies and the flood risk management. The objectives, though, were not reached fully, not because of a deficiency in the legislation, but it could also because of insufficient funding, slow implementation, and slow integration of the environmental objectives in different sectors. Yes, they actually talk about a future outlook. They examine how good this Water Framework Directive was, and they say that it is sufficiently prescriptive with regard to the pressures that need to be addressed, and it is also flexible to incorporate emerging challenges, such as the climate change, the water scarcity, and pollutants of emerging concerns, such as the microplastics and pharmaceuticals. One key area that this fitness check found was that we needed to improve and achieve better results on chemicals that are present in the water. In 2019, then, the European Commission launched the Green Deal, the European Green Deal. It's a very, very ambitious vision, yes, which aims them to bring the 27 state members from a high to a low carbon economy without reducing prosperity and improving the people's quality of life through cleaner air and water, better health, and thriving in a natural world. So we are still waiting to see how all these things will be achieved, but this is definitely a very, very ambitious vision for Europe. Going now to, so what is the current status of the waters in Europe? Yes. So when we talk about the surface waters, then we talk about the rivers, the lakes, transitional and coastal waters. They evaluated what they call the ecological status or potential of these waters, looking at biological quality elements, physical chemical elements, and hydromorphology elements. And here we can include, for instance, that these waters can be altered either by the building of dams, canals, yes, so that you would actually facilitate agriculture, urbanization, or you could be building the dams also to produce energy or protect against flooding. So this was evaluated, and this is what we have. This is the picture that we see for the ecological status or potential of the rivers, lakes, coastal and transitional waters in Europe. Yes, we can see that, so this is red is bad, poor, moderate, good, and high. So we actually have a distribution, yes, and if I could be looking at it, we would say that most of the surface waters in Europe, they would be between moderate and good, yes. So what are things that could be influencing then this ecological status or potential to go towards poor or bad? It could be pollution. So this affects the water quality. Yes, the habitat degradation. Yes, so pollution could come then from wastewater. They could come from agriculture. They could be from industry. Yes, and also these, as I told you before, these hydromorphological pressures. We were talking about building or changing the river beds, etc. Now, looking at the countries, yes, again, so this figure here shows the percentage of water bodies that are not in good ecological status or potential. Yeah. So we can see that there is a very, very large variation across Europe, and the Northwestern Europe, they have actually the lowest status. Yeah, so we can include the UK here. This is part of Sweden, yes. But northern countries in the Scandinavian region, Iceland, Ireland, Scotland, they actually in some countries, so we're just looking at the colors. So the blue colors means that they are in a better shape as compared with the color red, which is telling that they are not in a very good shape. So we are doing a lot for the water. There is still a lot that needs to be done. But then we have the question, so can we actually drink this water? Yeah. So the drinking water in the EU is under very strict quality control, if I can say that. Yeah. So the water needs to meet chemical and biological targets, and this information then is sent by every single member state back to the EU, and we can always find this information, and this is readily available to the public. Yeah? So people in Europe drink water, tap water. Yes. What is the source of this tap water? About 50% comes from groundwater, 36% is from surface water, and 14% is from different sources. On average, an European drinks about or utilizes 120 liters per day. And this 120 liters per day can be divided into washing or personal hygiene, cooking, and 65% they actually drink this tap water. Yes, 55% directly from the tap, and another 10% they would actually filter before drinking it. So the perception within Europe, yes, it's a little bit more than 80%. The people think that the water, they have access to good quality water where they live. In 2020, late 2020, the European Parliament then, they adopted the revised Drinking Water Directive. The previous Drinking Water Directive was almost 20 years old, yes? And they then actually adopted this revised directive. So this directive then would guarantee then safer access to water for all the Europeans, increase or ensure that the highest standards were present for the drinking water, yes? And this would be then in line with the zero pollution ambition that was announced within the European Green Deal. So they want then a lot of effort into water quality standards, looking also at emerging pollutants like endocrine disruptors as well as microplastics. Yes. And the other one is promote tap water to reduce then the plastic bottle consumption and make sure that there is transparency and all that. If we go now, because part of my presentation is related to plastics and microplastics, let's talk a little bit about plastics then. Yeah. So anywhere, if you look now around you, you are going to see plastic, either in your plastic bottle or even in your computer, everywhere that you can see plastic. So it is very useful, yes. However, it is also, because of the chemical properties of these plastics, it is also very, very difficult for us to dispose of them. And it may take hundreds and even thousands of years for the plastic to degrade in the landfills and in the environment. What are the plastics? So they are synthetic products. Yes, they are typically made of organic polymers with added chemicals. And the majority of these monomers are derived from fossil hydrocarbons, from coal, crude oil, and natural gas. In this picture here, I'm not going to spend time on that. This shows you then some of the types of plastics and some of the objects that we actually use in our daily life. This is the plastic. How much plastic do we generate per year? This is in tons, yes? And we can see here the US, we have China, we have Brazil. This is Poland. I actually had to check today in the map. This is Poland, yes? So this is how much plastics we generate the countries generate per year, or you can even calculate how much plastic one person can generate per day. Yeah, so we have a slight difference here. This is again Poland. I think this is Ireland, and this is the Guyana or Guianas. Yeah, we have also the US here. The plastics, about 8 million tons of plastic are thrown into the ocean annually. This plastic then will either go and accumulate at greater depth or on the seafloor. It is estimated that by 2050, we will actually have more plastics in the sea than actually fish, unless we actually act on it. Yes. Where do this plastic comes from? Yeah. A lot of the plastic, then they are thrown through the pollution, either the focal or the diffuse pollution. They will enter rivers, and from the rivers, then they will go to the sea or to the oceans. Yes. And this is then a figure that was in 2015, the top 20 polluting rivers across the world. And I just put here for your, because I'm talking to to people in Brazil. I'm presenting this, the case of the Amazon River. Yes. And one thing that we should consider when we talk about rivers, and similar to what I told you before, the Amazon River doesn't only stay, it's not really Brazilian. Can we claim that it is Brazilian? No, because it actually courses through other countries. And these countries, in one way or another, will also affect the quality of the water that runs through the river. How much plastic do we have in the oceans? Now I want to see, so it is a comparison between the total amount, the global ocean, and comparing it then with, I just wanted to show here for the Mediterranean Sea, which is what I'm going to be talking a little bit about now.
5 minutes, Edna.
Yes, I will never finish in time.
Okay,
I'm going to go very fast, okay? So apologies for that. We have then plastics. They can break down into smaller and smaller pieces. We can actually track the path of any environmental contaminants. And this is one thing that might be of interest to you. And around the whole world, we actually have 5 global garbage patches. Yes. So there are rotating ocean currents in there. So we have actually huge amounts or concentrations of plastic debris there. The plastics have been found in the deepest parts of the ocean and also in the highest peaks of the world. So plastic is actually everywhere. They can enter the food chain, yes, and affecting and can actually lead to human exposure. Does it really, how do microplastics affect human? There is not enough evidence to show that. We know in vitro, most of these studies are in vitro, yeah? So there is an activity, there is a reaction to the presence of microplastics. We found microplastics in human stool samples, but we don't really know what is actually what is happening inside the human. In 2019, the WHO has released a report that's saying that we don't know what is happening within in microplastics in humans in terms of effect, and there is not enough evidence to show that there is a problem. This is microplastics. This is plastics in the Mediterranean Sea. And you can actually see that lots of different countries are contributing in more or in higher or less proportion for the plastics, macroplastics or microplastics. Eventually, in the future, if we would ever arrive at an isolated island, we would actually be greeted not by pristine and clean beaches, but beaches that would be filled with plastics. This is just to show you then how the different countries and where we have leakage of microplastics coming to the Mediterranean Sea. What happens in Cyprus? According to the guidelines, Cyprus, the bathing water guidelines, Cyprus has excellent beaches, but this is actually because of the parameters that we measure or that are defined by these directives, which is basically for E. coli and intestinal enterococcus. There is a study that looked for the presence of microplastics in the coast of Cyprus, different places, and they found up to 50 meters, they actually found microplastics in there. How about the drinking water? We actually examined drinking water in the 4 major cities in Cyprus. Yes, we also looked at the water tanks, and we looked also in plastic bottles. These are the types of microplastics that we observed, and we were able to quantify and observe microplastic in all samples that were examined. Yes. So more recently, we are looking in a slightly different way. We are looking at microplastics in bird feces. These birds, they migrate, yes, and in this particular bird species, they also eat a lot of pebbles to help them digest their food. And among some of these pebbles, they are also ingesting microplastics. The last part of my presentation is about drinking water and relating it to parasites. Yes, this is by UNICEF, and about 2 billion people use drinking water contaminated with feces. That this can then cause diarrhea, cholera, dysentery, typhoid, and polio, and almost 500,000 people die from diarrhea. Yeah. So what is the status of drinking water facilities in the world? We can look at in high income and in the developed world, they are very, very high, yes. And you go to lower income countries, we are going to see a progressively less access to drinking water facilities. This is where these unsafe waters can lead to death. I had just a comparison to South America and Europe, yes, and this is the number of people then that do not really have access to safe drinking water in the world. In Europe, about 14 people die every day because of diarrheal disease, yes, and if we were actually to implement, improve the water, improve sanitation, hygiene, we could then reduce the death, and we could also reduce other water-related diseases. We are interested in looking at 2 parasites that they cause diarrhea. They are underreported. One is the Giardia that causes giardiasis. This is the distribution in terms of notification within the EU. And in Cyprus, actually very, very low throughout from 2013 to 2017, very, very low rates. The other parasite is Cryptosporidium that causes Cryptosporidiosis, yes. And in Cyprus, this has never been reported, but more recently, we actually have being able to detect that the parasite is just not reported. So it's a case of non-reporting other than non-existence of this parasite. So the work that we are doing with this parasite is actually, we have just started it. We have managed to detect it in the bird feces. So we know that bird feces will contaminate water bodies. So it is just a question of being able to detect, being able to diagnose it. So what is the problem? We have the contamination of water and by these bacteria, fecal bacteria and parasites, and they do pose a risk to human health. Yes, particularly in Cyprus and other Mediterranean countries, when we talk about where we depend a lot on tourism, a lot of our economy depends on tourism, we really need to be we need to take a lot of precautions. Because these parasites, they are not affected by water treatment. They can survive in swimming pools, and they can even survive in the seawater. I'm sorry that I have been rushing, so I hope I managed to give you an overall status of what is going on with the waters in Europe and in Cyprus. Yes, I gave you a little bit about the plastics, the issue of plastics and the environment, and a little bit of the water contamination that can actually cause diarrheal diseases and death, and some of the work that we have been doing recently. So I used almost all my time. So please, if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate actually to send me an email or contact me. So thank you then.
Obrigado, Edna. Eu acho que nós temos tempo para uma pergunta ou duas aí da audiência. Eu mesmo tenho algumas, mas eu vou me segurar aqui, porque nós realmente temos essa pressão do tempo aí.
O Vicente, o Jader, acho que o Vicente quer falar.
Vicente?
Então, eu fiquei curioso, né? Porque até achei interessante que a professora usou até um material aí da ONU, que eu até uso nas minhas aulas, né? Aqui também, né? Foi o último relatório de qualidade de água da ONU, né? Você começou com a sua apresentação e vem mostrando aí os dados que me chamaram a atenção pela questão da qualidade de água na Europa, né? Eu achava que a coisa era bem melhor do que aqui na nossa região. E aí eu tenho uma pergunta assim, que talvez você possa saber ou não, que é com relação à recuperação de rios, né? Na Europa. Por exemplo, nós tivemos a questão que é bastante conhecida, que é do Reno, né? Que, segundo a BBC Brasil, a recuperação custou mais de 15 bilhões de dólares e que conseguiu reverter um quadro sério de poluição, né, neste rio. E aí minha pergunta é, você conhece algum outro caso de investimento, de forte investimento de recuperação de rios, trabalhando nessa questão de saneamento, né, por tudo que você apresentou na sua palestra aí, passa para mim, pelo menos, passa uma ideia totalmente diferente da que eu tinha, né, que achava que os rios da Europa pudessem ter uma qualidade de água, um controle aí de saneamento, e não parece ser essa a realidade, né? Se você tem conhecimento de algum tipo de investimento maciço que tenha sido feito, está sendo feito em algum país lá, de recuperação desses rios, de algum rio lá na Europa atualmente. Essa é a minha pergunta. Obrigado.
Na verdade, e se você me permite, o problema que a gente tem quando a gente apresenta esses dados é que esses reports que eles dão, se você não tiver em todos os parâmetros excelentes ou bons ou excelentes, você é marcado, você é downmarked, tá? Então, não quer dizer que aquele slide que eu mostrei que tudo era vermelho, né? Não necessariamente representa. Pode ser que ou o fato deles estarem mexendo muito com o rio, ou uma parte onde você está vendo a parte da população de peixes ou da população de algas.
Professora, então, parece ser o IQA, pelas cores, parece ser o nosso IQA aqui, que é o índice de qualidade de águas.
Mas o índice que eles usam se você tiver um que não está dentro do limite, você é marcado para baixo. Tá? Então, isso é uma coisa que até eles comentam quando eles estão avaliando a qualidade de água. Mas a água que a gente bebe, né, direto da torneira, todas essas águas elas passam por um nível de qualidade que tem a comunidade europeia define quais são os limites mínimos, tá? E depois cada país membro da comunidade europeia eles podem então definir em cima daqueles limites mínimos, eles podem definir outros limites, tá? Mas todos eles, na verdade, têm que atingir o limite mínimo. E, por exemplo, eu tive recentemente na Suécia, né? E se você olhar, eu estava em Estocolmo, se você olhar dentro daquela figura, Estocolmo está em vermelho, quer dizer, que seria muito ruim. Mas eles são extremamente orgulhosos da qualidade de água deles. Eu perguntei, né? Eu falei assim, eu posso beber água da torneira? Mas é claro que você pode. Então, são coisas diferentes quando a gente está avaliando o que é que eles medem, né? Com o nível, com o que é medido em termos de análise química para dizer que a água, então, é potável, que não tem nenhum problema para beber. Quando eu estava preparando essa palestra, né, eu achei até que foi meio confuso, porque quando eu coloco assim, 80% da população dentro da Europa acha que a água deles é boa e eles tomam água. Mas eu tinha acabado de mostrar antes que aquela avaliação ecológica não era, estava dizendo que a maioria dos rios, né, ou do surface waters não era tão bom. Então tem uma disparidade, né? Mas o que eu queria dizer, o que eu acho que eu tenho que falar para você, que em termos de avaliação da qualidade de água que chega até a gente, né, em todos os países a gente tem, eles têm esse controle muito estrito e então que toda a água praticamente dentro da comunidade europeia é potável.
Ok. Eu tinha mais uma pergunta aqui para fazer, que era o Nicolas que tinha sinalizado aqui, mas
obrigado, professor.
Nicolas?
Oi? Não, eu tinha apertado, mas eu achei que por conta do tempo não fosse tempo.
Ah, tá.
Bom, então vamos lá. Eu queria tirar uma dúvida, na verdade. Eu quando estudei bastante aí sobre a questão do mar Mediterrâneo Oriental, eu vi que é uma região que eles consideram como oligotrófico, né? Tem poucos nutrientes, enfim, tem uma caracterização aí de biota bem limitada, né? Bem limitante aí por conta da questão de nutrientes. E eu vi também que tem uma contaminação, uma intensidade de contaminação, tanto de microplástico, quanto de óleo, quanto de outras fontes contaminantes, né? E a minha dúvida era com relação a esses organismos, será que a gente está lidando com organismos muito sensíveis, aliás, pouco sensíveis, né, a essas alterações? Como é que é essa relação da sensibilidade desses organismos em um ambiente com poucos nutrientes, com esses contaminantes, né? Você saberia me dar uma luz acerca disso?
Eu acho que a gente está colocando, quer dizer, você está querendo só fazer uma correlação entre a presença dos plásticos, macroplásticos e microplásticos e tentar correlacionar isso com basicamente a presença de vida dentro do mar. A Manuela pode concordar comigo ou não. Dentro do mar Mediterrâneo, eu acho que a ausência de peixes, né, basicamente, foi uma coisa que pegaram demais. Não sei qual é a palavra que usa para isso, né? Então, eu acho que talvez isso que tenha sido a coisa principal que tenha feito com que essa população de peixes e outros tenham desaparecido tanto. Né?
Concordo, é absurdo.
Então, eu não sei se eu posso fazer uma correlação direta com isso. Tá? O mar, em termos de nutrientes, esse mar é realmente muito pobre. Se você pensar que assim como a gente tem os microplásticos que entram lá, você pode pensar também que um monte de dejetos da água do wastewater, na verdade, entram também. E essa água é rica em nutrientes. Talvez seja melhor para as algas e outras espécies, não tanto para os peixes, né? Mas é difícil você começar a isolar só os microplásticos de todas as outras coisas que estão entrando dentro desse mar.
Tá ótimo. Bom, vamos seguir a nossa programação, então. Eu vou agradecer a professora Edna pela apresentação, agradecer pelas perguntas também.